The word market originates from the Latin mercatus, translating directly to a physical place for trade. For centuries, the definition of a market was strictly bound by geography. In early industrial economies, executing transactions required buyers and sellers to occupy the same physical space. Limited transportation meant that prices and product availability were dictated entirely by local face-to-face negotiation. Modern economics strips away that geographical requirement. Today, a market is defined as a decentralized, abstract system for resource allocation. It is any arrangement, physical or virtual, that enables the exchange of goods and services. The expansion of global communication and cross-border capital flows severed trade from physical boundaries. Billions of dollars in assets can now change hands between continents in milliseconds. This evolution creates a necessary distinction between two core concepts: the rigid structural boundaries of a market and the dynamic behavioral engine known as marketing. To understand modern exchange, we have to map the strict architectural parameters of microeconomics first. Only then can we examine the customer-oriented strategies that drive transactions within those parameters. This animated diagram represents the irreducible base of any market. An exchange requires voluntary participants, a distinct object of value, and an agreed-upon medium of exchange. The interaction of supply and demand creates the price mechanism. As demand pressure increases against a constant supply, the price rises, organically determining the relative value of the goods without central coordination. As the network scales, these prices fulfill a critical function: information dissemination. Price fluctuations act as decentralized signals, continuously updating producers about consumer preferences and the scarcity of materials. Guided by these signals, the market executes resource allocation. Capital and labor are automatically diverted away from saturated sectors toward their most highly valued uses. In complex economies, markets also facilitate risk sharing. Financial instruments like derivatives allow participants to hedge against future uncertainty by trading the risk itself. However, this decentralized mechanism is entirely reliant on perfect conditions. When those conditions are not met, the result is a market failure. Failures occur when the system cannot allocate resources efficiently. This happens due to externalities like pollution, asymmetric information where one party hides defects, or the chronic underprovision of non-profitable public goods. Left unchecked, systemic risks compound these blind spots. The 2008 recession showed how cascading failures create catastrophic disequilibrium, requiring massive government intervention to stabilize. The decentralized price mechanism is highly effective at organizing economic chaos, but its inherent vulnerabilities necessitate strict regulatory and institutional frameworks to survive. The base model of supply and demand does not operate in a vacuum. It is constrained by the physical dimensions of time and geographical infrastructure. This graph illustrates the very short period market. Here, supply is completely fixed. Because the goods are typically perishable and production cannot be adjusted instantly, the price is dictated entirely by immediate consumer demand. At the opposite extreme is the secular market. Measured over decades, demographic shifts and technological innovations allow producers to completely overhaul their physical capacity, resulting in a highly elastic supply curve. Geography imposes parallel restrictions. Local markets handle perishables or high transport cost services within a small radius, while regional markets rely on organized logistics to distribute manufactured items across a broader province. Scaling up to international markets introduces heavy structural complexities. Trading across borders requires multinational agreements and sophisticated foreign exchange systems to manage currency fluctuations. Markets are further divided by the nature of the transaction itself. Product markets handle final consumer goods, while factor markets manage the acquisition of production inputs like labor, land, and capital. The intersection of a firm's time elasticity and geographic reach establishes the absolute physical and regulatory limits of its operations. The final structural dimension is the degree of competition. This visual field represents perfect competition. In this environment, barriers to entry are non-existent, and the products are entirely homogeneous. Because there are so many identical options, no individual seller has the power to dictate the baseline price. Monopolistic competition introduces slight variations. Because sellers offer differentiated products, they gain minor, localized control over their pricing based on branding and consumer preference. In an oligopoly, such as the telecom or airline sectors, massive entry barriers allow a few dominant firms to absorb the market. Pricing decisions here are highly interdependent. A move by one sphere forces an immediate reaction from the others. A monopoly exists when prohibitive barriers isolate a single entity. With no close substitutes available, this single seller completely controls the supply and sets the price. A firm's exact location on this competitive spectrum dictates their entire strategy. It determines whether they must passively accept the market price or if they possess the leverage to command it. If market classifications establish a static architectural grid, marketing is the active, dynamic process engineered to facilitate voluntary exchange within those borders. Modern marketing relies on customer orientation. This deliberate shift away from pure production efficiency places consumer psychology and behavior at the center of product development. This diagram outlines the customer value equation. An exchange only triggers when a customer perceives that the functional and emotional benefits of a product outweigh the combined costs of money, time, effort, and risk. Marketers engineer this equation by maximizing specific types of value. Functional value focuses on raw utility and performance, while psychological and social value rely on brand prestige and status. Tesla balances this equation by offering the functional value of cutting-edge electric vehicle technology, stacked alongside the psychological prestige of environmental consciousness. IKEA optimizes the equation differently. They maximize monetary value through extreme affordability, pairing it with functional flat-pack design to outweigh the customer's effort in assembly. Delivering value relies on demand creation. This process involves generating primary demand for an entirely new product category or selective demand to establish preference for a specific brand in a crowded sector. Digital platform economies demonstrate how marketing constructs new behaviors. Intermediating exchanges through an app interface lets companies build massive markets out of previously idle assets. Marketing is the deliberate process of balancing the value equation to trigger continuous transactions. Legal frameworks, supply elasticity, and competitive concentration form the inflexible macro boundaries of any industry. Within those rigid boundaries, marketing serves as the fluid adaptation mechanism. Firms use data analytics and dynamic pricing to navigate disruptions and shifting consumer trends. Heavily accelerated technological change has drastically shortened product life cycles. Consumer hardware and digital services now require agile, constant iteration to hold market share. Generating demand is only the first step. Delivering on it requires massive logistical efficiency to fulfill the precise functional promises made during the exchange. Both the economic theory of the market and the business practice of marketing point toward a single objective: customer satisfaction. Satisfaction is a measurable metric. It dictates brand loyalty, generates repeat purchases, and significantly reduces the heavy costs of future customer acquisition. A market provides the mathematical capacity for exchange. The continuous, value-driven feedback loop of marketing is what sustains long-term economic equilibrium.